to your program Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. My name is Gifty, Adjei, and on this program we celebrate people who impact our society positively. And of course, in a jiffy, I'll be talking to one such great personality this country has produced. So my guest for today is a great personality, like I said, a man who's contributed so much to his community, his people, and humanity in general. Becoming a Paramount chief at a young age of 38, for over 4 decades, he's been an inspiration to his subject. On the political front, he served his country to the best of his abilities in the areas of health, chieftaincy and religious affairs, internal affairs under the PNDC regime. In 2009, our guest also had the opportunity to serve as a member of the Council of State of this country under the Fourth Republic. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest for today is Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong, the Omanhene of the Agogo traditional area in the Ashanti region. Hello, Nana.
Well, to begin with, it's heartwarming to be recognized for this interview. And I'm very grateful to you.
Okay.
You are most welcome.
We're also grateful to have that honor to talk to you, for you to share your experiences with us.
Great. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Welcome you to my house.
Thank you. Have a nice house. Thank you. So let's begin, Nana, with your early days, your childhood. You know, where were you born? Who were your parents, siblings, and what kind of home did you come from that made Nana who Nana is today?
I had a very difficult start in life.
Okay.
I was born in Agogo. Whoever has been Agogo know the terrain. We are caving in a valley surrounded by 7 mountains. So whoever comes from that terrain comes from a very, very difficult background. And I had it a very, very difficult start in life.
Okay.
To begin with, my father died in my very early age. It just happened that my father would have been one of the successful in those days, scholars, if I would put it that way. He happened to have been a classmate of the would-be Prempeh II, and that's Ajman Prempeh, in the early 30s. The two of them were classmates. And that's Ajman Prempeh was called Charles Asamoah. My father was called Charles Akuoko Sarpong. They were in the same classroom, together with the late Mr. R.K. Pratt, a former timber merchant, who also come from Asante Achim. And then my own father-in-law, Mr. Mensah. All of them were in the same class. And my father died when I could be at about the age of about 4 or 5. So it became a very difficult start in life.
So you mentioned that you had a difficult start. Was it because of the death of your father?
That is correct.
Okay,
so it was my grandma, Nana Amadumtie, who happened to have taken charge of my education.
Okay.
And I started primary school in 1945 with about 3 others in the primary school in the Heart and Practical Church House. Methodist school, we were the 4 of us were the 4 people who started that primary school. And after 2 years, I went to the Presbyterian Primary School in 1947 and finished the primary school in 1953. Then I obtained scholarship to enter Accra Academy in 1954. That started my romance with Accra Academy. And then completed Accra Academy in 1957. Indeed, I was a day student, and I lived with a gentleman called Mr. Afokwakye at Adabraka. And I was commuting between Adabraka and Jamestown. Accra Academy was then situated in Jamestown. But we had very good tutors. And I had the ambition to make the child opportunities available. And we have very good tutors. At that time, Accra Academy was a government-assisted secondary school. And I had obtained a scholarship to cover tuition. So I had, in effect, a free education as a day student.
What subjects, please?
That provided me an opportunity which otherwise I could not have obtained in those days. Because the work to do in those days were those who would be able to go to either Adisadel, Fantipim, Achimota, Tindogesons, and other schools who admitted people in boarding houses. So as I said, I had it very, very difficult at the start.
Okay, were you the only child or you had other siblings?
Wasn't. I was born after a lady, but she died. And my mother was expecting another lady. And it turned out to be a boy.
Okay.
I think my mother was disappointed in the Renoy Ashanti in the matrilineal system. That started to put a distance between my mother and my good self. But the gap was filled in by my grandma.
Okay.
So my grandma became my real pillar in life.
Wow.
And in fact, my palace in Agogo, I dedicated that palace
to your grandmother,
to Nana Amadamtie. She was an opinion leader in those days. And she was always putting people together. And I think I learned so much from her in my infancy. And she was a very generous woman. I don't know whether I inherited this aspect of her life, but she influenced me a lot. My mother also was a very generous woman, but because of this, it put some distance between us. In fact, my mother did not encourage me to go to school because of this. Because she wanted a lady and she got a boy.
But which was equally good.
But that I said, my grandma feeling the vacancy.
Now, allow me, understand what happened during the 40s and 50s. At the time there was no
time in Ashanti.
There was no...
Ashanti, it was so different from what they grabbed at the colony.
Okay.
The colony had all the facilities. But in Ashanti, that is where the problem came from. In Ashanti, there were only about 4 senior schools in those days. Bompata, Jaso, government school. Then we have Kumasi government school. And then Sunya government school. So those who are not able to make it to Jaso, for instance, or Bompata Senior School, or Kumasi Government School, or to Jaso, or Sunyani, then it meant that their education 2007 ended at that time.
Oh, okay.
But in those days, to have obtained an assessment certificate was a good level of education. So my father would have been in those days one of those you in Ashanti would have been described as one of the educated elements. In fact, my father became a sanitary inspector and then became the registrar of the Agogo Traditional Council, where she met my mother, a royal from the Agogo Adriana family. He was also a royal from the Brito family of Domiabra. Her mother was also a queen mother. And that's why the mother was able to take her team to Jaso Secondary School. And as I said, he and Sarpong, who became Prempe the second of Ashanti, were classmates. And I learned that my father was in fact on top of their class. This story came to me from Mr. R.K. Pipra, who was also a classmate. And my own father-in-law, Mr. J.K. Mensa, who was also in the same class.
Watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more. Please stay with us. We're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television, of course, on Legends of Our Time. We talk to our heroes, and of course, today my guest is Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong, the Omanhene of the Agogo traditional area. So, Nana, before we went for the break, you were telling us about your educational background, the fact that you went to Accra Academy. And so from Accra Academy, you went to Opoku, was it Opoku?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. For the sixth form program.
Yeah, from Accra Academy, we took a competitive examination to enter the sixth form. Accra Academy had no sixth form. That was competitive. For all those schools who do not have a sixth form in their schools. Highly competitive. But I went through it with distinction and was admitted to Opoku in 1958 for the sixth form. And from there I was free through Kwame Nkrumah's initiative to enter the university, sixth form to a free 2-year course where we had a very great foundation. We have some of the best tutors. That took me through to 1959.
Okay, when you say you have some of the best tuition...
Yeah, we did indeed.
Exactly how was the educational system like
at the educational system at that time, after we have taken the Cambridge School Certificate, you went through the sixth form for Cambridge Higher School Certificate, which took 2 years. There I read economics, history, Latin, and economics, as I said, and Latin for 2 years.
Okay.
And then at that time, we completed our course in December. We had to wait for nearly 9 months before we would enter the university.
Why?
So I worked at the Labor Department for about 6 months, and then I was transferred to the Government Printing Department, which took me to Tamale for about 4 months. And then in October 1960, I entered the University of Ghana to read law.
Okay, so at University of Ghana, that was immediately after independence.
That is correct.
So kindly let us have a feel of what happened before independence, you know, the struggle for independence, what really happened.
This, in fact, the period before independence will be described as the romantic period in the history of Ghana.
Wow.
Romantic period because this was the period when Ghana was at the height of expectation. Between 1950, or the period of the struggle was the late 40s, when Nkrumah came on the stage. It was 1948, when Nkrumah came onto the stage, right through to 1951, when Nkrumah became the first prime minister in a black prime minister in Africa. Nkrumah was made the prime minister in 1951. So from 1951 to 1954, Nkrumah was the prime minister. Then LLM then emerged on the scene in 1954. I remember at that time I was in Accra Academy. That then was the struggle also for what it was described as the National Liberation Movement, seeking federation for the country. And the reason for that struggle was that the Ashantis felt that the balance of development had tilted in favor of the colony, especially by way of education, and that all the resources of Ashanti and Bradata Bunahaf were part of Ashanti, and that their resources were being used to support the colony, who were having the education, they were having the secondary schools, you know, at Timota, Fansipim, at the Saddle, St. Augustine, Wesley High School,
Wesley Girls High School,
Holy Child, I don't know where he went. All these schools were situated in the colony. And the movement was to the effect that the Ashantis were being cheated out of the national resources of the country.
Okay.
So they wanted a fair share of the resources of the country, especially education. But let me say at this stage that in 1951, Nkrumah had provided the free primary education. And at that time, all Ashantis, in fact, all over the country, everybody was to have a free primary education. That fundamentally changed the tide, not only in favor of Ashanti, but also in the North. Of course, about the same time, the Northern People's Party was also launched, which aligned itself to the NLM. So it was the NLM and the allies, which were championed almost vertically the same cause.
Okay.
So later on, the two movements metamorphosed into one movement called the United Party, because Nkrumah passed a law to abolish parties based upon regionalism, and ethnicism. So all these movements joined together to form the United Party, which was then headed by Dr. Adjei Busia before independence in 1957.
Okay, so
before I entered the University of Ghana,
that was the situation.
That was the situation
at the time.
So the expectations were high, and Nkrumah had also declared that he wanted the civil service to be Africanized. So it meant that all graduates who came out of the university had employment at their core, because all the colonial agents were being asked to go home. So it was a period of expectation for graduates. That's why they describe it as the romantic period in Ghana.
In Ghana.
Because in fact, when you entered the university, not only was university education free, but we were also getting allowance of 13 pounds a term. You call it 13 million pounds.
For studying at the university.
Getting everything free. And we were also getting 13 pounds a term as allowance.
As allowance.
Things have changed.
Things have changed. So Nana, we'll take another break and then we'll continue. Just joined us. You're watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Gala Television. Of course, today my guest is Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong, the Omanhene of the Agogo traditional area. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Please stay with us. So watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television, and my guest for today is the Omanhene of the Agogo traditional area, Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong. So we're talking about University of Ghana diaries, and you said even whilst in school you were given some stipends to, you know, make a living. And we also learned every student was allocated a room.
That's correct.
Wow. But today, it's not the case.
Well, this was, as I said, when I used the word or the phrase romantic period, it's also reflecting the kind of education system that we had.
Okay.
Because the kind of literature that we studied. Because it's a history in the period of Britain that they describe as the romantic period in the history of Britain. Part of the history, the literature at that time, that referred to the Victorian age. So the Victorian age of Ghana was the period before independence. And soon after independence, of course, the reality dawned on us that fighting for independence and attaining independence were entirely two different situations. When we went away from the colonial system, then there was the reality of governing ourselves. Then, of course, then there was a crash. But there's also comfort in this. It also brought out of the self-confidence which have been lost to us in the years past. Because Kwame Nkrumah set the stage that the black man was on the stage, was on the world stage, and that inferiority complex that we had before should be cleared from our eyes. So when Nkrumah declared that Ghana is free forever and that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the total liberation of the African continent, that was a fight which needed to be won. So at the fall of Nkrumah, practically the African continent have been liberated generally, including the release of Nelson Mandela, which in our time was thought almost to be impossible. In fact, in those days, we had a couple of students from Southwest Africa, now called Namibia. And in those days, when you look at the system that was existing, it almost looked like impossible that West Africa will become free. But now Namibia is free. Most of them were also studying free, as much as we also studying free in our universities. That was also a bold statement from Ghana. The Black Star was unveiled. And look at the Black Star Square. It was telling a story that the Black Star has risen. And we have not looked back. So the self-confidence that was generated from 1957 should inspire us to do more for ourselves. I think one thing that we need to do is to make sure that we take control of ourselves and take responsibility for what we do.
And Nana, how can we do that?
Well, I've just been reading a book by a gentleman called Mr. Hans Roth. It was a street, he stayed in Ghana. And I said, we have observed certain situations which need to be corrected. He has mentioned time management as one of the responsibilities we Ghanaians have to take seriously. That we have to be serious about the way we manage our times. That is, when we say we are starting a seminar at 2 o'clock, our bureaucrats, our politicians should know that time means seriously for others. If you don't take time seriously, they take their time seriously. If you go to Japan, when they say dinner starts at 1 o'clock, by 1:15 or 1:30, they start packing there. One of my chiefs worked in Japan, and when you talk of time, he knows it. They must know that they have to do the assignment and that they deserve what they are working for. That corners must not be cut. And then also, we should be able to say no when we have to say no. Because sometimes, especially when it comes to dealing with foreigners, Ghanaians are not able to say no to them when we have to say no. I don't know whether it's part of the psychological system of the colonial arrangements. We still have to welcome that. I think we have to work on that. There was a time that people thought that it might be impossible, for instance, to train doctors in this country. But Kwame Nkrumah said, no, we should be able to train our own doctors. And with the resources that we have at our disposal, and he said, Eastman, please, we have Kolebu, we have some of the best students. Let us start our medical school. It was somewhere in 1963 or thereabout. The Americans offered to put up a medical school near the University of Ghana. And Nkrumah said, no, we will do it ourselves. And it turned out that we produced some of the best medical personnel. the world has ever had. Now, you don't talk of training our medical personnel elsewhere. We are training some of the best medical personnel, including brain surgeons in this country, heart surgeons. You have to make a start somewhere. You must build that confidence in ourselves. So this is one of the things that perhaps out of experience,
Okay.
I would like to expose to us as Ghanaians. When I was appointed as the Secretary for Health.
Okay, Nana, we'll come to your career aspects, but once you've mentioned the man Kwame Nkrumah, I'm sure you had the opportunity to interact with him.
Indeed.
Who was Kwame Nkrumah, and do you think the historians have been fair to this man?
I think, on the whole, some justice has to be done to Nkrumah. The truth of the matter is that history is written by the victors. But I think over time, the history of Ghana has to be reassessed. And the true picture of Nkrumah reassessed. Of course, I lived through that.
Okay, so
there were some excesses that needed to be condemned.
Like what, Nana?
For instance, there was no need, and I say there was no need for the Preventive Detention Act at that time.
Okay.
There simply was no need. I lived through that. And maybe he was also not a team player. I couldn't, for instance, see why his closer friend who engineered his release from the prison walls of James Fort would have parted company with him and then join forces with his opponents. Something went wrong somewhere that Guedema in the end would have deserted him. There were some aspects of Nkrumah's rule we needed to have been condemned. There was simply no need for the Preventive Detention Act.
Okay, but what about the positives? What do you think that he might have done that today is not being captured?
The positive, as I said, the reassessment of his role in Ghana, the education and production of professionals that hitherto would have been taught as impossible in those days.
Okay.
For instance, he broke the myth that most of our personnel should be trained abroad. I was the beneficiary of the legal system. I was trained as a lawyer in Ghana, and some of the best brains in law were trained at the Faculty of Law, and unfortunately at that time it would have been impossible that lawyer would have been trained. So also would have been the training of medical personnel. So much change. And that laid the foundation for what we are experiencing today, frankly.
Okay, so imagine Nkrumah was to be alive today, would he be happy
I think he himself,
where Ghana is today?
Himself,
is it the Ghana he anticipated?
I think he himself will be amazed at the progress that has been made. For instance, he may have thought that perhaps if he had left the economy to be free, and then he let himself go as when you did in Singapore, perhaps Ghana would have been better off than today. Maybe we would have been like Singapore. But the assessment might take several angles. Okay. I was not an Nkrumah, to be precise. But I think a due recognition must be given to those who did the right things and who did the wrong things. The Preemptive Detention Act, as I said, was wrong, and there was no need, for instance, for the J.B. Danquah to have been detained. Okay. I have personal experience of him when I was a student, because the man I lived with, Mr. Afokwaki, was his personal friend. And he used to send me to him with some personal messages. But I used to see him surrounded by books with a piano on his side. So when I was at the university, I was actually detained briefly because of his death in 1965.
1965.
Yes.
Okay, so let's conclude the University of Ghana studies. So at University of Ghana, you undertook 2 courses, a BA in arts.
I took BA in arts.
And then law.
And then LLB in law.
Okay, so what influenced your decision to become a lawyer?
Well, for a start, my father briefly worked as a letter writer. In those days, the letter writers in Ashanti were lawyers in their own right, because people want to, see them with their problems, writing petitions. And my grandma thought that if I went to school, she would be saved the expense of going to letter writers to write petitions on some chieftaincy matters. We boarded her in those days.
Okay.
So again, maybe it could have been in the genes. And my grandma was also as an opinion leader in those days. She was putting people together, bringing people together, settling disputes. I experienced this in the days when I was growing up. These are things which influence when you are growing up. But in Accra Academy, of course, I was elected as the president of the debating society. And in Okuwari, I was also one of the leading debaters. And from there on, I think people began to encourage me to do law.
Okay.
In my own heart, I thought I would want to be. And the opportunities came my way. And of course, I took the opportunities head on.
Okay.
And at no cost to myself. You didn't need to travel abroad expensively. Those are the things for those of us who benefited from the educational system at that time, who want to give due credit to those who made those opportunities available. That made it different from the colonial system that was bequeathed to our neighbors. In fact, when I read that we are deporting some of our neighbors, I feel very sorry, because the French colonial system has failed, and most of the people in the French colonies are migrating to Ghana. That's the truthful fact. The Nigerians especially, about how the Nigerians are migrating to Ghana. That's a fact of life.
Okay.
In Kumasi, for instance, the population of prison in Kumasi is mainly due to migration from Burkina Faso and Niger. That is a big topic because Niger, they are producing uranium. The French are using uranium at the basis of the electric supply. The Nigerians are now, they have discovered oil. But Nigeria is one of the poorer countries, in fact the poorer country perhaps in the world. It's a huge mass of land. And the people are migrating to Ghana. If you go to Kumasi, more than about 40% or 30% of the population in Kumasi is made up of Nigerians.
Okay.
And Burkina Faso, they are also migrating to Ghana for good life.
Okay, Nana, I'm sorry, you have to take another
That's a big topic.
And we'll continue. So you're watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. And as always on Legends of Our Time, we talk to our heroes, our gems who make all of us proud. I'll take a quick break, and when I come back, we'll continue with the conversation. Don't go away. You're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. My name is Gifty, Adjei, and my guest for today is the Omanhene of the Agogo traditional area, Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong. So Nana, let's quickly zoom into your career experience. You landed your first job in 1966. Our age was that?
Would have been around about 38 or thereabout when I first was transferred to Cape Coast as an assistant state attorney. That was on specifically 18 December 1965.
Okay.
I was transferred to Cape Coast as the assistant state attorney. I worked for 1 year. And then I felt that I was not feeling that I was having full capacity as an state attorney. I had, been brought up in a farming community used to competition. As I say, in very mountainous area, you will go to the farm, realize that I'm not working to full capacity, and that I will go into private practice to be more competitive. So within a year, I decided to resign and to go into a private practice. So in 1967, I resigned to go into private practice, to go to a more productive, a more challenging situation, and I did. I felt more fulfilled.
Okay. Was he also influenced by the money that came from?
Well, not really.
Okay.
But I felt that I'm working to full capacity. Working through files and occasionally going to court. Once a while I said, no, this is not a job that I felt I would do. I was not working to capacity. I would do to a more challenging job.
Okay.
And then I did, and I felt very happy in my life. Traveling, listening to people's complaints, and taking up their causes was something that I felt I would do. This is something that my grandma was doing. Listening to people, attending to their problems. This is what my father would have done as a letter writer, taking people's complaints, writing, explaining meaning to them, taking their complaints.
Yeah.
Aha. So I felt, well, it was more satisfying to do that.
Okay.
So I felt very good.
Fulfilled.
When I got into it.
Okay. So as
and
a lawyer,
I didn't look back.
As a lawyer, did you specialize in an area?
No, in Ghana,
just a general practice?
It's general.
Okay.
But basically, when I started making my waves in criminal law practice.
Okay.
And I had some very big case.
Can you share some of them with
us? Yeah, that is particular. There was a case, a famous called a case called Adjei. A person had died in some mysterious circumstance in police jail, and he had been buried. And I called the body to be exhumed.
Okay.
For examination to find the real cause. It was a sensational case in those days, and I directly put me on the stage.
Okay.
That was a case that really helped me to get on the stage.
So and did you win?
I really wanted really to find the real cause, and it will prove that the person died not from natural causes. That was 1967, the early stages of my practice. And then Akuoko became my base.
Okay. At that time, were you married? At the time?
At the time, yes.
Okay.
I have married my wife.
Okay, so
she's here.
Yeah, you've met her. So let's look at the switch to politics, or did you combine the two, law and politics?
Well,
what influenced your decision to go into politics?
After 1960, you know, the coup came after 1966, and that was led to my political baptism. There was a movement called the Telford movement. Some of us decided that, you know, soon after there was an emergence of what they described the Busia tradition, which was the opposite of the CPP. So some of the intellectuals in Ghana, led by Dr. Basin, formed the movement called the Telford movement, and one of the leading figures in the movement, Dr. Obeda Samoa, for instance, was one of us.
Okay.
And we became friends from that time. And that is what ultimately led me to join the PNDC in 1988. So the Telford movement, of course, disintegrated it. And then Dr. Samoa joined, he and Dr. Gama and the rest joined the NA, Woodman's Party. And some of those others also joined Busia movement. That is what led to the 1969 Republic, which was led by Dr. Busia.
Okay.
But I was not in Parliament at that time.
Okay.
Yes. Then, of course, in 1972, Kutrua Champos coup happened. I was here in practice.
Okay, so let's come to the PNDC regime, where you were given a number of positions as Secretary of State was, in terms of health, internal affairs.
To be precise, in 1975, before 1988, 1975, I was in practice in Cape Coast when my uncle, Akuoko, died. So I was preparing myself really for politics for this intervening period to come in my life. And then my uncle died. I was going to see to the arrangements Then there was this call to duty to become their community leader. So in December 1975, I became the Agogo. But at that time, there was no ban on chief taking part in politics. But to be precise, there was a break in my life when I responded to the call to duty to become the Agogo in December 1975. Right through. Then, somewhere in 1982, another opportunity happened to me. I was sent on the delegation, 1982, sent on delegation to the United States by the Asante to undertake some cultural mission. Then, 1982, I met Dr. Bernard Samoa in New York, and he further extended to me invitation to join the PNDC. That was in October 1982. But then I asked for to consult others before I will make my mind. That was 1982. That, of course, was not to happen until finally I accepted to join the PNDC in 1988.
But
yes.
You were originally a CPP.
You were not CPP.
Okay.
No, I had never joined the CPP.
Okay.
I'm not giving this analysis based upon observation at the time.
Okay.
I have never been, call me a nationalist. Okay. No.
Okay. But once you joined the PNDC, you were given some positions.
Well, I was then, after the persuasion by Dr. Samoa and Mr. D.F.R.9, I was persuaded to join the PNDC in 1988. And on April 4, 1988, I was formally appointed as the secretary of the PNDC for health.
For health.
Together with K.B. Asante and my old friend J.H. Osu Achampong as the PND secretary for Pon Ahafo. That was mine. That started what I would describe as my romance with the PNDC.
With the PNDC. So,
yeah.
As the Secretary for Health, what exactly was your portfolio? What would you say were some of your achievements?
Well, I didn't go to the health for any real mindset. But I think I went there when that place was supposed to have some problems. And I was saying at that time, they said, look, we are sending you to this place, not with any program in mind, but they are putting you in charge to reform it if you find it necessary. But at that time, they had a monetary system. If they found that we were not performing, they would ask you to go back to where you were coming from. That was the order of the day, the PND system. I didn't go there with the evening mindset, but I went there to get things done.
Okay.
And I think that happened.
So what were some of the challenges
because
you
identified? The challenges at that time, I think that they almost totally appeared that there was a certain disarray in that ministry.
Okay.
But when I went there, I saw that what they needed was not any transformation, but what they needed was encouragement, leadership. And what I went there working as a private person who had been in business. And I went there to run the place as a businessman would do. Because they had never seen a minister going to the office of ministry at 6:30 a.m. when most of them would report especially the chief directors and nurses already will report at 9 because they will see me there at 6:30 or 7, and they will see me with my own kettle in the office, pouring my tea. Before they will come to the office, suddenly there was a whole change in attitude. And if you go to the Ministry of Health now, they will know that things started changing. Leadership is a function and not a title. You have to get results. And that is what Rawlings wanted. If you didn't show results, he will show you the way. That credit might go to Chairman Rawlings. He got things down. And I will say this for him. In the Third Republic, there have been a certain conclusion that electricity could not go beyond Sunyane. But Chairman Rawlings decided that he would extend electricity to all regions of the country. And Chairman Rawlings did extend power beyond Sunyere to all the regions in this country. It is something that Chairman Rawlings or President Rawlings later must be given credit for. Chairman Rawlings wanted results. He was a no-nonsense man. And I think he achieved results. For instance, the Cardiothoracic Center. He said, Nana, I want this center to be built. And we brought down from Boating from Germany, and he said, you have to get this thing done. And I made sure that the Cardiothoracic Center was built. That was one of the achievements of Chairman Rawlings. Now you don't need to travel abroad to get heart surgery done. We are doing this in ourselves. This is something that Ghanaians ought to be proud of. That is the spirit that I've been speaking about. You should be able to develop that confidence that we can do it. And it's all because education is something that we should embark upon. We have to invest in education. And when we invested in education, we have been achieving results. When Kwame Nkrumah decided that we should have a medical school in this country, we are no more sending our students abroad to become medical professionals. When he set up the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, we are now producing engineers and professionals of our own. Surely, we still have to send some of them to train abroad in special cases, but we have to make the start. I'm sure you know that most of you have benefited in one way or the other. So this is a thing that I would like to say that we have to do. We have to develop the self-confidence that we can do many of these things ourselves.
Okay, Nana, thank you for that great advice. Self-confidence is all. This is the first part of this interview with Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong, the Omanhene of the Agogo traditional area. We'll bring you the concluding part next week. My name is Gifty, Adjei, and my guest has been Nana Kwame Akuoko Sarpong, the Agogo Manhene. Make a date with us next week, same time, and we'll bring you the concluding part. Thank you for watching.